The relentless Arizona sun beat down upon the small village of Copper Creek as the stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the general store. A cloud of dust billowed around the weathered vehicle, momentarily obscuring the handful of curious onlookers who had gathered to witness the arrival of the town's newest resident. When the dust settled, Diana Frost emerged from the coach, her gloved hand adjusting the wide-brimmed hat that shielded her delicate features from the harsh sunlight. Diana paused, taking in the sight before her. A single dusty street lined with wooden buildings in various states of repair. The structures stood in stark contrast to the refined brick edifices of Boston, where she had spent her entire 22 years. A faint sensation of doubt rippled through her, but she straightened her shoulders, refusing to let uncertainty show on her face. There was no turning back now. "Miss Frost, I presume?" A portly man with a handlebar mustache approached, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "Mayor Jenkins, at your service. Welcome to Copper Creek, Arizona Territory." He beamed at her with genuine enthusiasm. "We're mighty pleased to have an educated lady like yourself joining our community." Diana offered a polite smile, extending her hand. "Thank you for the warm welcome, Mayor Jenkins. I'm looking forward to beginning my duties." "The schoolhouse is all ready for you," the mayor continued, gesturing down the street toward a modest wooden building set apart from the others. "It's not what you might be accustomed to back east, but it's sound and has quarters for you attached to the back." As the driver unloaded her trunks from the stagecoach, Diana noted the curious stares from the townspeople, some welcoming, others assessing, a few openly suspicious. A frontier town like this wasn't accustomed to unmarried women traveling alone, especially one as refined in appearance as Diana. "I'll have my boy Thomas bring your things to the schoolhouse," the mayor offered, gesturing to a young man hovering nearby. "Mrs. Holloway at the general store has prepared some essentials for you, food supplies and such. The children are mighty excited to meet their new teacher come Monday morning." Diana nodded gratefully. "That's very kind. I'd like to see the schoolhouse now, if that's convenient." As they walked down the dusty main street, Mayor Jenkins filled the silence with details about the town, established 6 years prior during a brief silver mining boom, now sustained by cattle ranching, and as a supply stop for travelers heading further west. Diana listened politely, though her mind was elsewhere, rehearsing the lessons she had planned for her first day of teaching. The schoolhouse stood on the eastern edge of town, a simple rectangular building with a small bell tower. Inside, rows of rough-hewn benches faced a teacher's desk and blackboard. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. The space was bare but clean, smelling of pine and chalk. "It's not much," Mayor Jenkins said apologetically, "but it's the pride of our little community." Diana ran her fingers along the edge of the desk. "It's perfect," she said, and found she meant it. After months of uncertainty following her father's passing, this humble schoolhouse represented something precious, a new beginning, a purpose. "The living quarters are through that door," the mayor indicated. "Basic accommodations, but private. We've arranged for water to be delivered daily. The, necessary facilities are out back." Once she was finally alone in her new quarters, a simple bedroom, small sitting area, and rudimentary kitchen, Diana allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She sank onto the narrow bed, removed her hat, and let out a long, shaky breath. The journey had been grueling, 4 weeks of travel by train and stagecoach across a country that seemed to grow wilder and more unfamiliar with each passing day. A letter from her father's lawyer lay in her reticule, its contents memorized through countless readings during her journey. With her father's unexpected death and the discovery of his substantial debts, the family home in Boston had been sold to satisfy creditors. Diana's teaching credentials were her only asset, and the frontier territories paid 3 times what she could earn in the East. The position in Copper Creek had been her salvation, though now facing the reality of this dusty outpost, she wondered if she had been too hasty in her decision. "No," she whispered to herself, "this is an opportunity, not an exile." A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Holloway, the general store owner's wife, stood outside with a basket of provisions, fresh bread, preserves, dried meat, and a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Thought you might need these to get settled," the older woman said, her weathered face creasing into a smile. "First night in a new place is always the hardest." Diana accepted the basket gratefully. "That's very thoughtful of you, Mrs. Holloway." The woman lingered in the doorway, her expression growing more serious. "Word of advice, Miss Frost. Keep your doors locked at night. The Apache have been restless lately." Diana's brow furrowed slightly. Before leaving Boston, she had read several accounts about the indigenous peoples of the territories. "I understand they're defending their ancestral lands," she said carefully, remembering the more sympathetic accounts she had studied. Mrs. Holloway's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. "My dear, you'll soon learn that book learning doesn't apply out here. These are dangerous times. The savages don't distinguish between innocent schoolteachers and soldiers when they raid. Just last spring, the Wilkinson family—" She stopped abruptly, seeming to think better of sharing whatever grim tale she had been about to recount. "Well," Mrs. Holloway continued, her tone softening, "you just be careful is all I'm saying. Fort Braverman is 15 miles north and the cavalry patrols regular, but still." After the woman left, Diana unpacked her meager belongings. Among her most prized possessions were her books, volumes of literature, history, science, and a special collection of texts about the American West, including several accounts of Native American cultures. She arranged these carefully on a small shelf, a piece of her former life taking root in this new one. As evening approached, Diana sat on the small porch behind her quarters, watching the setting sun transform the landscape. The desert glowed with unexpected colors, russet, gold, and deep purple painting the distant mountains. Despite her exhaustion, she found herself captivated by the wild beauty of this place, so different from the manicured parks and crowded streets of Boston. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. A group of 6 cavalry soldiers rode past the schoolhouse, heading north toward the fort. They noticed her sitting there and tipped their hats, though the look in their eyes made Diana uncomfortable. She retreated inside, securing the door behind her. That night, as she prepared for bed by lamplight, Diana opened her journal and began to write. April 17th, 1870, first day in Copper Creek. The journey is finally over, though perhaps a new journey is just beginning. The town is smaller than I imagined, the people cautious but not unkind. There seems to be much fear regarding the Apache people. I wonder if there might be more to that story than what I'm being told. Father always said that truth often lies somewhere between opposing accounts. I miss him terribly tonight, but I must focus on what lies ahead. 12 students await me on Monday morning, ranging from 6 to 16 years of age, according to Mayor Jenkins. What will I teach them beyond letters and figures? What kind of teacher will I become in this wild place? She closed the journal, extinguished the lamp, and lay in darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night, coyotes calling in the distance, the whisper of wind around the corners of the building, the absolute silence that seemed to exist beneath it all. 20 miles to the south, Kai stood motionless atop a rocky ridge, his form a dark silhouette against the star-filled sky. At 28, the son of Chief Maka of the Chiricahua Apache had already lived many lives. Warrior, peacemaker, negotiator with the white man's army, and now something of an outcast among his own people for advocating restraint in the face of increasing encroachment on their lands. The night air carried the scent of creosote and sage as he gazed northward, where the distant lights of the white settlers' fort glimmered like fallen stars. Behind him, Nahilzai, his childhood friend and fellow warrior, approached silently. "The soldiers move closer to our hunting grounds," Nahilzai said, his voice tight with anger. "Today, they rode within sight of the women gathering yucca. The elders say we must prepare to fight." Kai's expression remained impassive, though concern shadowed his dark eyes. "Fighting will only bring more soldiers, more death. And surrender will bring slow death in their reservations," Nahilzai countered bitterly. "You have seen what happens to our people there." Kai had indeed seen it during his visits to other tribes who had accepted the white man's terms, the sickness that swept through overcrowded camps, the starvation when promised supplies failed to arrive, the loss of dignity as proud hunters were reduced to accepting handouts. Yet he had also witnessed what happened when tribes fought against the endless stream of blue-coated soldiers with their repeating rifles and cannons. "There must be another path," Kai said, his gaze still fixed on the distant lights. "One that does not end with the annihilation of our people." "You sound like your grandmother," Nahilzai said, though there was affection mixed with the exasperation in his tone. Nasha, the tribe's eldest medicine woman, had long advocated for finding ways to coexist with the newcomers, arguing that adaptation had always been the Apache way of survival. "I will speak with the White Commander again," Kai decided. "Perhaps there is still a path that doesn't lead to bloodshed." Nahilzai spat on the ground in disgust. "You place too much faith in their words. While you talk, they prepare to kill." "Then what would you have me do, brother? Lead our warriors against their fort? Watch our people die in a battle we cannot win?" Kai rarely raised his voice, and the sudden edge in his tone made Nahilzai step back. After a moment, Nahilzai placed a hand on Kai's shoulder. "I would have you remember who you are, son of Mahka, warrior of the Chiricahua, not a beggar at the white man's table." When Nahilzai had gone, Kai remained on the ridge, his thoughts troubled. His position within the tribe had grown increasingly precarious. As the son of the aging chief, many looked to him for leadership. Yet his reluctance to embrace open conflict with the settlers had caused some to question his courage, others his loyalty. Only Nasha, his grandmother, fully understood his struggle. "Two worlds are colliding," she had told him. "You stand between them with a foot in each. This is not weakness, but strength, if you have the wisdom to use it." That night, as Kai finally sought his sleeping mat in the family dwelling, he dreamed of a woman with eyes the color of the summer sky and hair like pale desert grass. A woman he had never seen but somehow knew awaited him beyond the boundaries that separated his world from that of the white settlers. Diana's first week of teaching exceeded her expectations. Despite their initial wariness, the children, 12 in total, just as the mayor had promised, responded well to her methods. Most had received only sporadic education before her arrival, taught by whichever settler claimed some knowledge of letters and figures. Their eagerness to learn touched Diana deeply, reminding her why she had chosen teaching as her calling. Young Tommy Williams, a solemn 10-year-old with intelligent eyes, particularly captured her attention. Unlike the other children, Tommy asked thoughtful questions about the world beyond Copper Creek. During recess on Thursday, he approached her desk shyly. "Miss Frost, is it true you have books about the Indian tribes?" Diana smiled. "I do indeed, Tommy. Are you interested in learning about them?" The boy nodded. "My mama is half Cherokee, though she doesn't talk about it much. My grandma taught me some things before she died, but Papa says I shouldn't speak of it in town." Understanding dawned on Diana. Tommy's slightly darker complexion and straight black hair suddenly made sense, as did the way some of the other children kept their distance from him during play. "Knowledge is never something to be ashamed of, Tommy," she said gently. "Would you like to borrow one of my books?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Could I really?" That afternoon, Diana lent him a respectfully written account of various indigenous cultures. On Friday, she incorporated a brief lesson about the native peoples of the territory into her geography instruction, explaining how they had developed ingenious ways to thrive in this harsh landscape. The lesson had gone well, with most of the children showing genuine curiosity. Diana felt a small sense of triumph, a first step toward the kind of education she believed in, one that fostered understanding rather than fear. That triumph was short-lived. After dismissing the children for the weekend, Diana looked up to find Sheriff Buchanan filling the schoolhouse doorway. The lawman was a hard-featured individual in his 40s, with cold eyes and a perpetual scowl beneath his sweeping mustache. "Miss Frost," he said, removing his hat but not softening his expression. "A word, if I may." Diana set aside her papers. "Of course, Sheriff. What can I do for you?" The man stepped inside, his spurs jingling against the wooden floor. "Some folks are concerned about what you're teaching about the Apaches," he said bluntly. "We're trying to civilize these children, not fill their heads with romantic notions about savages." Diana felt heat rising to her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "Sheriff, I believe education should include understanding the people who lived on this land first. Knowledge breeds compassion, not weakness." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Compassion gets settlers killed out here, Miss Frost. Just ask the Wilkinson family, all dead last spring, even the children." His words hung in the air like a physical threat. Diana felt her resolve waver, but refused to show it. "I'll take your concerns under advisement," she said carefully. "Good day, Sheriff." As she watched him leave, Diana's hands trembled slightly. She had expected some resistance to her teaching methods, but not such swift and direct confrontation. Had someone reported her lesson to the sheriff immediately? Or perhaps Tommy's borrowed book had been noticed and commented upon. That night, she wrote in her journal by lamplight, her pen moving quickly across the page. April 23rd, 1870. I came west, seeking purpose after father's death, but I found a land divided by hatred and misunderstanding. Today I was essentially ordered to perpetuate that division in my classroom. There must be a middle path, though few seem willing to walk it. I cannot in good conscience teach these children to fear and despise people they barely understand. Yet I must be cautious. My position here is precarious, and I have nowhere else to go, should I lose this post. She closed the journal and moved to the window, gazing out at the vast, star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the boundaries of this small settlement, lay answers to questions she hadn't even formulated yet. Diana sensed that she stood at the edge of something momentous. Though she could not have explained this feeling even to herself, she could not know that 30 miles away, Kai was preparing to ride to Fort Braverman for one final attempt at negotiation, a journey that would forever alter both their destinies. The meeting at Fort Braverman had gone poorly. Colonel Hargrove, a career military man with ambitions that extended beyond his current posting in the territories, had barely listened to Kai's concerns about soldiers encroaching on Apache hunting grounds. "Your people have until the end of the month to relocate to the reservation," the colonel had stated flatly, not bothering to look up from the papers on his desk. "Those who resist will be considered hostile." "The land you have designated cannot support our numbers," Kai had argued, maintaining the calm dignity that had earned him respect in previous negotiations. "The water is scarce, the hunting poor. My people will starve." "That is not my concern," Hargrove replied dismissively. "The government has made its decision. Implement it or face the consequences." Now, as Kai rode away from the fort, a cold certainty settled in his chest. War was coming, despite his efforts. He took a detour, avoiding the main trails, wanting solitude to think about what must be done to protect his people. The sunset painted the desert in fiery oranges and deep purples when he spotted smoke rising from an unexpected location. Cautiously he approached, only to discover a small band of soldiers torching an Apache summer camp, firing into tippies where women and children had been preparing the evening meal. Rage and grief surged through him as he witnessed the massacre. When one soldier spotted him on the ridge and raised his rifle, Kai had no choice but to defend himself. The arrow flew true, striking the man's chest. More soldiers turned their attention toward him, and Kai fled, knowing this incident would be twisted, reported as an unprovoked Apache attack rather than retaliation for murder. By morning, the news of an Apache uprising had reached Copper Creek. Diana listened in horror as Sheriff Buchanan addressed the townspeople gathered outside the general store. "The savages ambushed our boys without warning," he declared, his voice carrying across the crowd. "5 good men dead. Colonel Hargrove has ordered a full military response. All outlying homesteads should evacuate to town immediately." "What about the school?" Diana asked, feeling a sense of unreality as she watched fear transform the faces around her. "Closed until further notice," the sheriff replied, his eyes cold when they met hers. "And Miss Frost, I suggest you stay close to town. We'll be organizing transportation back east for women and children by week's end." Diana saw fear in the eyes of the settlers, but also something darker, a hatred born of misunderstanding and rumor. She thought of Tommy Williams and the other children, wondering what lessons they would take from this moment. That evening, while gathering herbs for her small garden behind the schoolhouse, Diana overheard a conversation that chilled her blood. 2 cavalry soldiers, drinking outside the saloon, laughed about how easy it had been to provoke the savages by attacking an undefended camp. "Colonel says once we've dealt with this band, we can clear the whole territory," one slurred. "Good land going to waste on primitives. Best part is those fools in Washington will approve it all once they hear about the unprovoked attack on our patrol," the other replied with a chuckle. "Hargrove knows how to play the game." Diana's basket fell from her trembling hands. The massacre hadn't been an Apache attack at all. It had been a deliberate provocation. Before she could retreat unnoticed, one of the soldiers spotted her. "Well, look here, the schoolmarm's spying on us," he called, rising unsteadily to his feet. Diana backed away. "I was just tending my garden." "Heard you've been teaching the children to admire the savages," the other soldier said, his voice menacing as they advanced toward her. "Maybe you're a sympathizer who needs to be taught a lesson." Diana turned and ran, heart pounding. She made it to the schoolhouse and barred the door, hearing their drunken calls fade as another soldier called them back to the saloon. Her hands shook as she lit the lamp in her quarters. Everything she had witnessed since arriving in Copper Creek suddenly aligned into a terrible clarity. The tensions, the fear-mongering, the sheriff's warning. This wasn't about isolated incidents or misunderstandings. This was a systematic campaign to drive the Apache from their lands, with Colonel Hargrove orchestrating events to justify military action. Diana paced her small room, mind racing. She couldn't stay silent about what she had learned. But who would believe her word against that of the military? The settlers were already primed to accept any story that cast the Apache as bloodthirsty savages. She knew then that she couldn't stay, not just because of the soldiers' threats, but because she couldn't be part of a lie that would lead to the slaughter of innocent people. With shaking hands, she packed a small bag with essentials, a change of clothing, her journal, a few precious books, and the money she had saved. She would ride to Fort Braverman in the morning and demand to speak with Colonel Hargrove's superior, to tell what she had witnessed about the deliberate provocation. It was a foolish plan, born of idealism and desperation, but Diana couldn't stand by and do nothing. As she finally lay down to rest, sleep eluded her. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and the distant promise of rain. A storm was brewing, both in the heavens and in the affairs of men. Diana could not know that her decision had set her on a collision course with destiny, and with a warrior whose path would soon cross hers in the most unexpected of ways. The eastern horizon had just begun to blush with the first pale light of dawn when Diana Frost slipped from the schoolhouse door. She paused in the shadow of the building, surveying the silent main street of Copper Creek. Most of the town still slumbered, though a thin plume of smoke rose from the baker's chimney, and she could hear the distant sound of horses being tended at the livery stable. Diana clutched her small travel bag against her side, heart pounding. What she was about to do felt both foolhardy and absolutely necessary. The knowledge that soldiers had deliberately provoked conflict with the Apache weighed heavily on her conscience. She could not remain silent, nor could she stay in a town that would soon be swept up in a wave of violence built upon lies. The stable boy, a freckle-faced youth named Jed, looked up in surprise when she entered the livery. "Miss Frost, you're about mighty early." Diana summoned her most authoritative teacher's voice. "I need to rent a horse, Jed. Immediately." The boy hesitated. "Sheriff said no one's to leave town on account of the Apache troubles." Diana's mind raced. She needed a convincing lie, and quickly. "I've received an urgent message. My aunt has fallen gravely ill at Fort Braverman. The messenger came in the night." Jed's young face softened with sympathy. "I'm awful sorry to hear that, ma'am." "So, you see why I must leave at once?" Diana pressed her advantage. "Surely the sheriff wouldn't expect me to abandon a dying relative." The boy's reluctance visibly wavered. "I suppose not. But you shouldn't travel alone, ma'am. It ain't safe." "The messenger had to continue to Tucson," Diana improvised. "But he assured me the road to the fort is well patrolled by cavalry. I'll be quite safe." Still dubious but unwilling to argue with the town's teacher, Jed saddled a gentle mare for her, a dappled gray named Mercy that had been donated to the town by a rancher's widow. "She ain't the fastest, but she's sure-footed and calm," Jed explained as he adjusted the stirrups to accommodate Diana's height. "Have you ever ridden before, ma'am?" Diana had in fact taken riding lessons as a girl in Boston, though those genteel outings on manicured paths hardly prepared her for frontier travel. Still, she nodded confidently. "I'll manage just fine." The boy showed her how to guide the mare and how to secure her bag behind the saddle. As Diana mounted, wobbling slightly before finding her balance, Jed offered a final piece of advice. "Stay on the main trail, Miss Frost. If you see dust clouds or riders that ain't wearing blue, you turn right around and gallop back to town, you hear?" Diana nodded, touched by the boy's concern. "I'll be careful, Jed. Thank you." As she rode north out of Copper Creek, the rising sun at her back, Diana felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. For the first time since her father's death had upended her carefully planned life, she was taking action rather than merely reacting to circumstance. The sensation was both frightening and strangely liberating. The landscape gradually transformed as she rode. the flat desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with saguaro cacti and twisted mesquite trees. The morning air still held the night's coolness, but Diana knew the heat would soon intensify. She had brought a canteen of water, but worried it might not be sufficient for both her and the horse if the journey took longer than anticipated. She had traveled perhaps 10 miles when the first stirrings of unease prickled along her spine. The trail ahead wound between two low ridges, a natural bottleneck that made her feel suddenly vulnerable. Diana slowed Mercy to a walk, scanning the rocky slopes for any sign of movement. That's when she spotted them, dust clouds on the horizon approaching rapidly from the northwest. Her heart leapt into her throat. Cavalry patrols, perhaps? She strained her eyes, trying to distinguish blue uniforms, but the riders were still too distant. It's likely soldiers, she reassured herself aloud, though Mercy's nervous whicker suggested the horse wasn't convinced. As the riders drew closer, Diana's optimism faded. These men rode differently than cavalry soldiers with their rigid military posture. They moved as one with their mounts, their forms fluid and purposeful, and they wore no blue uniforms. Apache warriors. Diana's mouth went dry with fear. She remembered Jed's warning and turned Mercy around, urging the mare to gallop back toward Copper Creek. But the horse, unaccustomed to such urgency, resisted briefly before breaking into a reluctant trot. By then, the warriors had spotted her. Diana veered off the trail into a ravine, hoping to find cover or an escape route. Behind her, she heard shouts and the thunder of pursuing hooves. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as she pushed Mercy harder, the mare now sensing her rider's fear and responding with greater speed. The ravine narrowed ahead, its walls growing steeper. Diana glanced back to see 3 warriors had dismounted and were approaching on foot, moving swiftly and silently over terrain that slowed her horse considerably. Their faces were painted for war, their expressions grim. "Faster, Mercy," Diana urged desperately. "Please, girl, faster." The mare stumbled on loose rocks, nearly going down before regaining her footing. Diana clung to the saddle, her heart pounding so violently she felt lightheaded. The ravine curved sharply ahead, and as they rounded the bend, Mercy suddenly reared in terror at the sight of a sheer rock face blocking their path. A dead end. Diana tried to control the frightened horse, but her limited experience betrayed her. Mercy reared again, higher this time, and Diana felt herself slipping from the saddle. She clutched desperately at the mare's mane, but gravity won. The world tilted and spun as she fell, striking her head against stone before tumbling painfully down a rocky slope. The last thing Diana saw before darkness claimed her was a sky that seemed suddenly, ominously dark for morning, clouds gathering with unnatural speed, as if a great storm were brewing out of nowhere. Miles away, Kai rode alone across the desert, his thoughts as turbulent as the sky above. He had separated from the war party led by Nahilzai after a bitter argument. His childhood friend had been consumed by righteous fury after learning about the massacre of their summer camp, determined to exact vengeance on any white settler within reach. "They murdered our women and children," Nahilzai had shouted, "and you still seek peace?" "I seek justice, not blind vengeance," Kai had replied. "Attacking innocent settlers will not bring back our dead. It will only ensure more Apache blood is spilled." "Then stay behind with the old women," Nahilzai had spat. "Those of us with warrior hearts will make the bluecoats pay." The memory of those words still stung as Kai patrolled the borderlands between Apache territory and settler communities. He could not stop his people from seeking vengeance, but neither could he join them in attacking innocents who knew nothing of the soldiers' treachery. Instead, he hoped to prevent further violence by warning away travelers from both sides who might unknowingly ride into danger. The storm building on the horizon troubled him, not just the gathering wall of dust and clouds that signaled a rare and powerful desert storm, but the metaphorical storm of conflict that threatened to consume everything in its path. The Apache had weathered many challenges over generations, adapting and surviving against countless threats, but this new wave of white settlement felt different, more absolute in its determination to erase his people from the land. As the first gusts of wind carried stinging sand, Kai noticed tracks leading into a narrow ravine, fresh tracks of a single horse carrying a light rider. He frowned. Only a fool would be traveling alone with both a sandstorm and war brewing. Either this was someone dangerously ignorant of the territory's perils, or someone desperate enough to risk them. Following the tracks, he discovered signs of a fall, disturbed earth, small drops of blood on stone. The rider had been injured. Kai dismounted, following the signs with the tracking skills honed since childhood. The wind was rising, erasing marks almost as quickly as he found them, but his experienced eye could still read the story written in the disturbed earth. He found her, half buried by sand already beginning to drift with the strengthening wind. A white woman, unconscious, her golden hair coming loose from its pins to whip around her face in the gusting wind. A deep cut on her forehead had left dried blood on her temple. Without intervention, the coming storm would claim her life within hours. Kai hesitated only briefly. Whatever her people had done to his, he could not leave a defenseless woman to die alone in the desert. His grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, "How we treat the vulnerable reveals the true strength of a warrior." He knelt beside the unconscious woman, checking for broken bones before carefully gathering her slight form in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile seeming against his chest. Her horse was nowhere to be seen, likely having fled after throwing its rider. The sandstorm was nearly upon them now, visibility already declining as the air filled with swirling dust. There was no time to return to his people's camp. Instead, Kai headed for a cave he knew in the nearby foothills, a place where Apache hunters sometimes sheltered during the desert's violent weather. It would provide protection until the storm passed. With the woman secured before him on his horse, Kai rode swiftly, using his intimate knowledge of the terrain to find the safest path through increasingly treacherous conditions. The wind howled around them, carrying sand that stung any exposed skin. He pulled his bandana over his nose and mouth, and draped a portion of his blanket over the unconscious woman, to protect her from the worst of the stinging particles. By the time they reached the cave, the storm had intensified to near-blinding conditions. Kai carried the woman inside the sheltering darkness, laying her gently on a relatively flat section of the cave floor. Working quickly, he gathered dried brush from the back of the cave where previous occupants had stored it, and soon had a small fire burning. In the flickering light, he examined the woman more carefully. Her clothing marked her as definitely not from a ranching or farming family. The fabric too fine, the cut too formal despite the dust and travel stains. A teacher, perhaps, or a new bride brought to the territory by some shopkeeper or official. The wound on her temple wasn't deep, but had bled freely as head wounds tend to do. Kai cleaned it with water from his canteen, then applied a poultice of herbs he carried in his medicine pouch, a mixture his grandmother had taught him to prepare for injuries. The woman remained unconscious through his ministrations, though her breathing was steady and her color good, considering the circumstances. Outside, the storm raged with growing intensity. Sand hissed against the cave entrance like a living thing, while the wind's howl rose and fell in eerie mimicry of a woman's wail. Such storms could last hours or even days. They were trapped together until nature decided otherwise. Kai settled cross-legged on the opposite side of the fire, watching the woman's face in the dancing light. There was something compelling about her features, a strength beneath the delicate appearance, visible even in unconsciousness. He wondered what series of decisions or misfortunes had led her to be riding alone on a day when both natural and human dangers threatened the territory. He did not have to wonder long. As the fire popped and sparked, the woman began to stir. Diana awoke to firelight, dancing on stone walls and the howling of wind outside. Her head throbbed painfully, and when she tried to move, every muscle protested. Confusion gave way to fear as memories flooded back. The warriors pursuing her, Mercy's panic, the fall. Then came the realization that she wasn't alone. A man sat cross-legged on the other side of the small fire. His long black hair was tied back with a leather cord, and his copper skin glowed in the firelight. He wore buckskin leggings and a cotton shirt that appeared to be of white man's making, though adorned with beadwork at the collar. His dark eyes studied her without expression. Apache. The realization sent a bolt of terror through her. Diana tried to scramble backward, but dizziness overwhelmed her, and she collapsed with a small cry of pain. "Be still," the man said, in clear, accented English. "Your head injury is not severe, but movement will bring pain." Diana reached up tentatively, finding a cloth bandage on her forehead. "You helped me?" He nodded once. "The storm would have buried you. Outside, the wind shrieked louder, and Diana realized the cave entrance was now almost completely obscured by blowing sand. They were sealed in together, at least until the storm abated. "Thank you," she said cautiously, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "My name is Diana Frost. I'm the schoolteacher from Copper Creek." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or recognition of her occupation. "I am Kai, son of Chief Maka of the Chiricahua." Diana felt a new wave of fear. The Chiricahua were the band mentioned in the soldiers' conversation, the tribe supposedly responsible for attacking the patrol, according to the official story being circulated. "Are you going to kill me?" she asked directly, her voice trembling despite her effort to appear brave. Kai's expression hardened, though whether from anger or offense, Diana couldn't tell. "If I wished you dead, I would have left you to the storm." Diana flushed with shame at her assumption. "I'm sorry. It's just, there's talk of war. They said your people attacked soldiers without provocation." "They lie," Kai said flatly, poking at the fire with a stick. "It was soldiers who attacked our camp. Women and children died while preparing the evening meal." Diana nodded slowly. "I know. I overheard soldiers in town bragging about it. They said it was deliberate, to provoke your people into war." Surprise registered on Kai's face, quickly replaced by suspicion. "Why would you believe this? Why not accept the word of your own kind?" "Because I've seen how people speak of your tribes with contempt and fear rather than understanding," Diana replied, shifting to a slightly more comfortable position against the cave wall. "And because I've learned that powerful men often create the truth that serves them best." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind and crackling fire between them. Then Kai offered her a water skin. "Drink. The storm will last through the night. We are safe here." Diana accepted the water gratefully, suddenly aware of how parched her throat had become. As she drank, she studied her rescuer more carefully. Despite his stoic expression, there was intelligence in his eyes and a dignity in his bearing that commanded respect. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps not much older than her own 22 years, though experience had carved maturity into his features. "I was riding to Fort Braverman," she explained, handing back the water skin, "to tell someone what I heard, that the colonel's men deliberately provoked this conflict." Kai's laugh was without humor. "And you believe anyone would listen to a woman who speaks against soldiers? They would call you confused or hysterical, or worse, they would silence you permanently." The blunt assessment deflated Diana's resolve. She had been naive, she realized, thinking that truth alone would be sufficient to overcome the machinery of prejudice and power that Colonel Hargrove represented. "Then, what can be done?" she asked softly. "I cannot stand by while innocent people, on both sides, suffer from these lies." "You cannot stop what has been set in motion," Kai said, though his tone had softened. "The hatred between our peoples has deep roots. This is merely its latest flowering." "I refuse to accept that," Diana said with sudden passion. "Hatred is taught, not born. As a teacher, I believe in the power of understanding to overcome fear." Kai studied her for a long moment, as if seeing something new. "Your words are like those of my grandmother. She too believed peace was possible." "And what do you believe?" Diana asked, genuinely curious about this complex man who had saved her life, yet belonged to a people she had been warned to fear. Outside, the storm raged with renewed fury, but in the cave something shifted, a small space of calm understanding, opening between two people from worlds set against each other. "I believe," Kai said carefully, selecting his words with precision, "that most men follow the easiest path. Hatred is easy. Vengeance is easy. Understanding requires effort. Few are willing to make." Diana nodded, struck by the wisdom in his assessment. "Yet here we are, an Apache warrior and a Boston schoolteacher, having this conversation." The ghost of a smile touched Kai's lips. Indeed, perhaps the storm has brought strange medicine. As he added more fuel to the fire, Diana noticed a long, partly healed cut on his forearm. "You're injured," she said with concern. Kai glanced at the wound dismissively. "A reminder of my last meeting with blue-coat soldiers." "May I?" Diana asked, gesturing toward her travel bag, which Kai had thoughtfully brought with them. When he nodded, she retrieved a small tin of salve she had packed. "This might help prevent infection." Kai hesitated before extending his arm toward her. The gesture required trust from both of them. Diana to move closer to a man she had been taught to fear, Kai to allow a white woman to touch him. As she gently applied the salve to his wound, Diana was acutely aware of the significance of this simple act of human care, crossing the boundaries that divided their peoples. As the night deepened and the storm showed no signs of abating, they shared stories. Diana of her life in Boston, her father's death, her journey west seeking purpose. Kai of his people's traditions, his training as both warrior and peacemaker, his growing isolation as tensions with the white settlers increased. "My father had a trading post near the Charles River," Diana explained. "I grew up surrounded by books and interesting visitors from around the world. He believed education was the greatest gift he could give me, even though many thought it wasted on a girl." "Your father was wise," Kai replied. "My grandmother says knowledge is like water in the desert, precious beyond measure, and meant to be shared." "Is that why you speak English so well?" Diana asked. Kai nodded. "I spent 2 years at a missionary school when I was young. My father believed we needed to understand the white man's ways to survive the changes coming to our lands." A shadow crossed his face. Not all of my people agreed with this decision. As they talked, something unexpected blossomed in that cave as the sandstorm raged outside, a connection neither had anticipated. Diana found herself drawn to Kai's quiet strength and wisdom, while he seemed to marvel at her courage and open-heartedness. When Diana finally drifted into exhausted sleep, Kai remained awake, watching over her. The wound on her temple had stopped bleeding, but he worried about the confusion that sometimes followed head injuries. Throughout the night, he tended the fire and listened to the storm, lost in thoughts about the strange turns of fate that had brought this unusual woman into his path. By morning, the storm had finally abated, leaving a transformed landscape of smooth dunes and exposed rock outside the cave. Diana awoke feeling stiff and sore, but her mind was clear. She found Kai at the cave entrance, surveying the altered terrain. "The storm has passed," he said as she joined him, "but it has changed many landmarks. We must be careful in our travels." Diana stepped outside, blinking in the brilliant sunlight. The desert had been reshaped overnight, familiar features buried or revealed by the sand's capricious movement. She turned to Kai, suddenly uncertain. "What will you do now?" he asked, his dark eyes unreadable. Diana considered her options. Her original plan to reach Fort Braverman seemed foolish now, given Kai's assessment of how her story would be received. Yet she could not return to Copper Creek either. Not after what she knew about the soldiers' actions, and certainly not after spending a night in the company of an Apache warrior. "I cannot return to Copper Creek," she realized aloud. "Not after what I know. The soldiers saw me listening to their conversation. They'll consider me a sympathizer." Kai nodded gravely. "And my people would not welcome a white woman among them, despite the truth you carry." They stood in silence for a moment, two people caught between worlds, neither fully belonging to either anymore. Then Kai seemed to come to a decision. "My grandmother's camp lies 3 days south. It is separate from the main tribal grounds, where only those who seek healing or wisdom dwell. You would be safe there until we determine how to proceed." It was an extraordinary offer, one that went against everything both their peoples would expect. Diana hesitated, weighing the dangers against the growing certainty that her path forward lay with this man who had already saved her life once. "I would be honored by your protection, Kai," she said finally. As they prepared to leave, Kai retrieving his horse that had been sheltered in a section of the cave deeper than their encampment, Diana collected her few belongings. Her future had never felt more uncertain, yet strangely she was not afraid. Something about Kai's presence gave her confidence that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with honor and intelligence. Riding together across the transformed landscape, Diana seated behind Kai on his horse, her arms hesitantly encircling his waist for balance, she felt a sense of rightness, despite the danger and uncertainty ahead. For the first time since arriving in Arizona territory, she was following a path that aligned with her deepest values, even if it led away from everything familiar. What neither could know was that their absence had already been noticed. A patrol from Fort Braverman had discovered Diana's abandoned horse wandering near the trail. Finding Apache tracks nearby and signs of a struggle, they had reached the obvious conclusion: another white woman taken by savages. The news would soon reach both Copper Creek and Colonel Hargrove, adding fuel to the fire of vengeance already burning. Meanwhile, the unlikely pair journeyed deeper into Apache territory, unaware that their fates had become irrevocably intertwined, not just with each other, but with the larger conflict engulfing the land they both called home. As they rode south, the sun climbing higher in the clear blue sky, Kai pointed to a distant mesa. "Beyond those red cliffs lies my grandmother's place. We should reach it by sunset tomorrow, if we travel without incident." Diana nodded, trying to ignore the growing awareness of Kai's proximity, the strength evident in the set of his shoulders, the gentle care with which he guided his horse over difficult terrain. Something was changing within her, something profound and unexpected that had nothing to do with their dangerous circumstances and everything to do with the man himself. "Tell me more about your grandmother," she said, seeking distraction from her confusing thoughts. "You speak of her with great respect." "Nasha is a medicine woman and a keeper of stories," Kai replied, pride evident in his voice. "She remembers the old ways before the white man came, but she also sees paths forward that others cannot. Many seek her counsel, even from other tribes." "And you think she will welcome me?" Diana couldn't keep the uncertainty from her voice. Kai was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother judges people by the truth in their hearts, not the color of their skin. She will see you clearly, Diana Frost. Perhaps more clearly than you see yourself." Something in his tone sent a shiver through Diana that had nothing to do with fear. As they continued their journey south across the vast open landscape, she found herself wondering what truths the wise old woman might see in her, and what future might be possible in a world where an Apache warrior and a Boston schoolteacher could find common ground in the midst of war. The journey to Nasha's camp took longer than Kai had anticipated. The sandstorm had altered familiar trails, forcing them to navigate carefully through transformed terrain. By nightfall of the first day, they had covered less than half the distance, necessitating a camp in the shelter of a sandstone outcropping that rose like ancient fingers from the desert floor. As Kai built a small fire, Diana gathered what edible plants she could find nearby, following his instructions on which desert flora offered nourishment. The simple domestic routine felt strangely comfortable, as if they had traveled together for years rather than a single day. "You learn quickly," Kai observed as Diana returned with desert primrose and prickly pear pads, the latter carefully stripped of spines, using a technique he had shown her hours earlier. "I've always been a good student," she replied with a small smile, "though I admit Boston schooling didn't prepare me for desert survival." Under Kai's guidance, they prepared a sparse but satisfying meal of dried meat from his provisions supplemented by the plants Diana had gathered. As they ate beside the fire, the vast desert night enfolded them in darkness, broken only by countless stars and their small flame. "The sky seems closer here," Diana murmured, gazing upward at the glittering expanse. "In Boston, buildings and trees always frame the view, but here, it's as though one could simply reach up and touch the stars." Kai followed her gaze. "My people believe the stars are the campfires of those who have gone before us. They watch over the living, guiding our paths when we are lost." "That's beautiful," Diana said softly. "My father used to point out constellations to me when I was a child. He said knowledge of the stars meant one could never truly be lost." "Your father was wise," Kai replied. "The stars are the same whether viewed by Apache eyes or white eyes. They remind us that some truths exist beyond our differences." Diana turned to look at him, his features illuminated by firelight. In that moment she saw not an Apache warrior, not the savage she had been warned about, but simply a man of dignity and wisdom. Something shifted within her, a perspective changing irrevocably. "Why did you really save me, Kai?" she asked suddenly. "You could have left me to the storm. No one would have questioned an Apache allowing a white woman to die, especially now, with war brewing." Kai was silent for a long moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "My grandmother taught me that how we treat the vulnerable reveals our true character," he said finally. "A warrior's strength is not measured by those he kills, but by those he protects." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "And perhaps I saw something in you worth protecting." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken meaning. Diana felt her heartbeat quicken, uncertain how to respond to the intensity in his dark eyes. "We should rest," Kai said, breaking the moment. "Tomorrow's journey will be demanding." As they settled on opposite sides of the fire, wrapped in blankets against the desert's night chill, Diana found sleep elusive. Her thoughts circled around this man who defied every preconception she had been taught about savages. In his presence, the rigid boundaries that had always defined her world, civilized versus uncivilized, educated versus primitive, proper versus improper, seemed increasingly meaningless. Dawn found them already moving, Kai's keen eyes reading the landscape for signs of water and the safest path forward. By midday, they had entered a region of striking red rock formations that rose majestically from the desert floor. The heat was intense, but Kai seemed unbothered while Diana struggled to adapt to the scorching temperatures. "We will rest during the worst of the heat," Kai decided, guiding his horse toward a shaded ravine. Only fools and lizards travel under the midday sun. In the cool shade of towering rock walls, they shared water and dried fruit. Diana removed her hat, using it to fan her flushed face. Her golden hair had come completely loose from its pins, falling in waves around her shoulders. Kai watched her with undisguised curiosity. "Your hair is the color of desert grass in autumn," he observed. "Among my people, such coloring would be seen as very powerful medicine." Diana touched her hair self-consciously. In Boston, her blonde locks had been considered her best feature, though proper ladies never displayed them so freely in the company of men. Yet here, miles from civilization's constraints, such concerns seemed trivial. "Is that why the children at your camp stared at me?" she asked, remembering what he had told her about their destination. Kai nodded. "They will be curious about many things. Your hair, your eyes the color of the summer sky, your pale skin. Few have seen a white woman up close." "Will they fear me?" Diana asked, the question revealing her deepest concern about their destination. "Children rarely fear what is new. They are merely curious," Kai replied. "It is adults who learn to hate what is different." He hesitated, then added more seriously, "But you should know that not all at my grandmother's camp will welcome your presence. Some have lost family to bluecoats and settlers." Diana nodded solemnly. "I understand. I don't expect welcome, only safety until—" She trailed off, realizing she had no clear plan beyond reaching the Apache camp. "Until the way forward becomes clear," Kai finished for her, his expression gentle. "My grandmother often says that when the path disappears before our feet, it is because we are meant to find a new direction." They resumed their journey as the worst heat began to wane, traveling through increasingly rugged terrain. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the red rocks in deepening crimson hues, Kai pointed toward a narrow pass between two towering cliffs. "Beyond lies my grandmother's valley," he said. "We will arrive before darkness falls." The pass opened suddenly into a hidden valley that took Diana's breath away. Protected by towering red cliffs on all sides, the small canyon contained an unexpected oasis of green. A clear spring emerged from the base of the eastern cliff, creating a small stream that nurtured cottonwood trees, willows, and lush vegetation before disappearing into the sand at the valley's far end. Nestled among the trees were perhaps a dozen dwellings, a mixture of traditional wickiups made of brush over pole frameworks, and a few more permanent structures incorporating stone and adobe. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the sounds of children's laughter echoed against the canyon walls. As they rode into the camp, activity ceased. Children froze in their play, women paused in their work, and men reached instinctively for weapons. Diana felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, the silence oppressive after the children's earlier laughter. Kai spoke in his native tongue, his deep voice carrying clearly in the still air. Though Diana couldn't understand the words, she recognized their purpose: explanation, reassurance, perhaps even a plea for understanding. A murmur of responses arose, some sounding skeptical or angry, others merely curious. Before anyone could approach, the flap of the largest wickiup near the spring opened and an elderly woman emerged. Despite her advanced age, evident in the deep lines etching her copper face, she moved with surprising grace. Her long silver hair was braided with colorful beads and feathers, and she wore a dress of softened deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork. "Grandmother," Kai said, dismounting and helping Diana down from the horse. He spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing occasionally toward Diana. The old woman listened without interruption, her keen eyes never leaving Diana's face. When Kai finished speaking, Nasha approached slowly. Diana stood still, resisting the urge to fidget under the penetrating gaze that seemed to look beyond her physical appearance into her very soul. "This is Nasha, my grandmother," Kai explained in English. "She is a medicine woman and an elder respected by all." Diana bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you for allowing me into your home." To her surprise, the old woman responded in halting but clear English. "You have kind eyes, not afraid but curious." She turned to Kai. "This one is different, like rain in the desert." The tension in the camp seemed to ease slightly at the elder's apparent acceptance. Nasha gestured toward a small wiki-up set slightly apart from the others. "Ah, you will stay there," she said to Diana. "Come, you must be tired from journey." Diana followed the old woman, aware of the continuing stares from the camp's residents. Children had begun to edge closer, their curiosity overcoming caution. One small boy, perhaps 5 years old, darted forward to touch Diana's skirt before retreating with a giggle. The dwelling assigned to Diana was simple but clean, with reed mats covering the dirt floor and a sleeping platform padded with fragrant grasses and soft furs. A small fire pit occupied the center, with an opening in the roof above to allow smoke to escape. "Rest now," Nasha said. "Later we talk." Left alone, Diana sank gratefully onto the sleeping platform. The events of the past 2 days, her flight from Copper Creek, the pursuit, the sandstorm, and the journey with Kai, had exhausted her more thoroughly than she had realized. Despite the strangeness of her surroundings, sleep claimed her almost instantly. The days that followed established a new rhythm to Diana's life. Each morning she woke at dawn to the sounds of the camp coming alive, women grinding corn or preparing food, children being sent to collect water or firewood, men departing to hunt or patrol the territory. Initially, most of the camp's residents kept their distance, regarding her with suspicion or outright hostility. Diana understood their wariness. She represented the people who had stolen their lands, killed their families, and now threatened their very existence. That they tolerated her presence at all was due solely to Nasha's authority and Kai's protection. The children, however, proved less resistant to her presence. Their natural curiosity gradually overcame their caution, especially after Diana began teaching them English words, drawing letters in the sand, and naming objects around the camp. In return, they taught her Apache phrases and showed her how to weave baskets from yucca fibers. "Tree," Diana would say, pointing. "Ndishlo," the children would respond, then dissolve into giggles at her attempts to pronounce the word correctly. Nasha often observed these impromptu language lessons with quiet approval. "Understanding begins with words," the old woman told Diana one evening as they sat together outside the medicine woman's dwelling. "You teach our children your tongue. They teach you ours. Both grow wiser." Diana nodded thoughtfully. "In Boston, I was taught that language was what separated civilized people from savages. But I've come to see that's not true. Different languages simply offer different ways of seeing the world." Nasha's weathered face creased in a smile. "You learn quickly, teacher from East. Not just words, but wisdom." Over time, Diana began assisting Nasha with various tasks, preparing herbal medicines, sorting seeds, drying meat, and preserving wild fruits. The old woman possessed encyclopedic knowledge of the desert's resources, treating every plant and animal as sacred gifts to be used with gratitude and respect. "Your people see land as something to own," Nasha observed as they worked together. "We belong to the land. It is not ours to possess, but ours to protect." These conversations, halting at first due to language limitations but growing increasingly profound, gave Diana new perspective on the conflict between settlers and indigenous peoples. What she had been taught to see as progress and civilization, she now recognized also contained profound loss of knowledge, of connection, of balance with the natural world. Kai came each evening, first to ensure her safety and comfort, then increasingly to talk. Their conversations stretched into the night, covering everything from philosophy to childhood memories. Diana found herself looking forward to these visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and confused her. "Your people think me a captive," Diana observed one evening as they sat outside her dwelling, watching the stars emerge. "But I have never felt more free than here." Kai's gaze was thoughtful. "And my people think me foolish for bringing you here. Yet I find wisdom in our conversations that I have found nowhere else." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Diana was acutely aware of his presence beside her, his strength, his gentleness, the way firelight played across his features. "Kai," she began hesitantly, "where I come from there are strict rules about relations between men and women, between people of different backgrounds." "We have such rules as well," he acknowledged, "though perhaps not the same ones." Their eyes met, and Diana felt something shift inside her, a recognition that transcended the barriers of language and culture. "What does your heart tell you about such rules?" Kai asked softly. "That they were made by people who never felt—" Diana paused, gathering her courage. "Who never felt what I feel when I'm with you." Kai reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers. "And what is that feeling, Diana Frost?" "Like I found something I didn't know I was searching for," she whispered. The kiss that followed was tentative at first, a gentle exploration of something new and fragile. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly, startled by the intensity of their connection. "This path is dangerous," Kai said, though he didn't move away. "For both of us." "All paths worth taking hold some danger," Diana replied, her heart racing. "I've never been more certain of anything." That night marked a turning point in their relationship. In the days that followed, their connection deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Diana learned the ways of Kai's people, how to move silently through the desert, how to find water in seemingly barren places, how to read the language of the stars. In turn, she shared her knowledge of literature, science, and the wider world beyond the territory. Not everyone approved of their growing closeness. Nahilzai, who had led the war party Diana had encountered and who occasionally visited the camp, made his displeasure known. "She will bring the bluecoats down upon us," he warned Kai during one such visit, his voice carrying to where Diana sat with some of the children. "Her people will not rest until she is returned, or avenged." "Diana is not a prisoner," Kai replied firmly. "She stays of her own will because she knows the truth about the soldiers' lies." Nahilzai spat on the ground. "Truth? The only truth that matters is that our people die while you court a white woman. Your father would be ashamed." The words struck deep, and Diana saw pain flash across Kai's features before his expression hardened. "My father taught me to judge people by their actions, not their blood. Diana has shown more honor than many born Apache." Nahilzai departed in anger, but his warning lingered. Kai knew there was truth in his friend's words, yet he could no longer imagine a life without Diana in it. Something profound had awakened between them, a connection that seemed to exist beyond the conflicts of their peoples. One evening, as the desert cooled with approaching dusk, Kai took Diana's hand. "Come, there is something I wish to show you." He led her along the stream that fed the valley, following its course upward toward the eastern cliff. The path grew steeper, winding among boulders and through narrow passages until they reached a secluded grotto where the stream originated. Here, a small waterfall cascaded from a cleft in the rock face, creating a clear pool surrounded by lush ferns and flowering plants. The setting sun painted the water gold and crimson, transforming the grotto into a place of ethereal beauty. Diana stood transfixed, listening to the musical sound of falling water. "This is sacred space," Kai explained, his voice low with reverence. "My people believe the Creator speaks most clearly in the voice of falling water." "It's beautiful," Diana whispered, afraid to break the spell of the moment with a louder voice. "As are you," Kai said simply. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Diana, I have never met anyone like you. Your courage, your compassion, your willingness to see beyond what you were taught, these things have changed me." She gazed up at him, her blue eyes luminous in the fading light. "And you have changed me, Kai. You've shown me a different way of seeing the world, of seeing myself." His expression grew solemn. "Among my people, when a man and woman choose each other, they make their promises before the elements, earth, air, fire, and water as witnesses." Diana's breath caught as she realized what he was suggesting. "Are you asking—" "I am asking if you will be my partner in all things, if you will walk beside me through whatever storms come, as I will walk beside you." His dark eyes held hers, filled with an emotion that needed no name in any language. "I know our worlds would deny us this. I know there may be no safe place for us, but I also know that what exists between us is rare and precious." Tears welled in Diana's eyes, not of sorrow but of overwhelming emotion. All her life she had followed paths others had laid before her, her father's expectations, society's rules, the conventional trajectory of a proper Boston lady. But here, in this wild place so far from everything familiar, she had found something authentic and true. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "With all my heart, yes." They stood together beneath the waterfall, water cascading over their bodies as they spoke promises that transcended the conflicts of their peoples. Kai recited sacred vows in his native tongue, then translated them for Diana, pledges to honor, protect, and cherish each other through all seasons of life. Diana, in turn, spoke from her heart, forsaking the formal wedding vows of her tradition, for words that expressed the depth of her commitment to this man who had transformed her understanding of the world. As twilight deepened around them, they sealed their union with an embrace that spoke of both tenderness and passion. In that moment, the barriers between their worlds seemed to dissolve, revealing a truth both simple and profound, that love, in its purest form, recognizes no boundaries of race, culture, or circumstance. That night, in the privacy of Diana's dwelling, they came together as husband and wife, their bodies expressing what words could not fully contain, the miracle of finding completion in another soul. For Diana, raised with Victorian notions of propriety that barely acknowledged the physical aspects of marriage, the experience was a revelation, a discovery that the body's wisdom could be as profound as that of the mind or spirit. Afterward, as they lay together watching stars through the smoke hole in the Wikiup's roof, Kai traced gentle fingers along Diana's arm. "In my language, there is a word, tawahi-ji, that means two who have become as one. It is rare even among those of the same tribe to find such a connection." Diana turned to look at him in the dim light, "And we have found it, despite everything that should have kept us apart." Kai nodded solemnly. "This is why I believe our meeting was not chance but destiny." She nestled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What happens now? Where do we go from here?" "For tonight, we need no answers," Kai replied, his arms tightening around her. "Tomorrow will bring its own wisdom." But tomorrow would bring not wisdom but crisis, as forces beyond their control conspired to tear apart what they had just joined together. Neither could know that even as they pledged their lives to each other, Colonel Hargrove was setting in motion a campaign that would threaten not just their future, but the very existence of Kai's people. 3 days after Diana and Kai exchanged their vows at the waterfall, a scout returned to camp with alarming news. Colonel Hargrove had launched a full military campaign against the Apache bands in the region. Troops were systematically searching every valley and canyon, burning camps, destroying food stores, and killing any warrior who resisted. "They claim they search for captives taken in raids," the scout reported as the camp gathered to hear the news. "But they kill without asking questions." All eyes turned to Diana, suspicion rekindled. Though many had gradually accepted her presence over the weeks of her stay, this news reawakened their fears. Some murmured that she had somehow signaled the soldiers, that her presence had brought this danger upon them. "This is not about me," she protested, standing beside Kai as the accusations flew. "It's about the land. The colonel planned this campaign before I ever came here." Nasha, who had become Diana's ally and teacher, spoke firmly to the gathered tribe. "The white woman speaks truth. The soldiers have wanted our hunting ground since before she was born. She is not our enemy." Her words calmed the immediate hostility, but the damage was done. That night, as they lay together in their dwelling, Kai voiced the thought they both had been avoiding. "You must leave, Diana. Return to your people." She sat up, staring at him in the darkness. "No, my place is with you now." "If you stay, you will die with us," Kai said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "The soldiers will not distinguish between you and any other woman in the camp." "Then we will both go," Diana insisted. "We can travel north to the territories or west to California. Somewhere we can start anew." Kai shook his head sadly. "My responsibility is to my people. I cannot abandon them when danger approaches." "And my responsibility is to you," Diana countered fiercely. "I will not leave without you." They argued long into the night, neither willing to yield. Dawn found them exhausted but resolute in their positions. It was Nasha who finally provided a solution. "Both must live to find each other again," the old woman pronounced when they sought her counsel. "Diana will go to the mission at San Xavier. The priests there are kind to our people. She will be safe until Kai can join her." "How will I find her?" Kai asked. "The soldiers watch all the trails." Nasha smiled mysteriously. "The same way you found her in the sandstorm. Some souls are connected by threads stronger than death itself." The plan was made. Diana would leave immediately, guided by Nasha's grandson to the mission 60 miles west. Kai would help his people escape the soldiers, then join her when it was safe. Their parting at the waterfall where they had made their promises was heavy with emotion. Diana clung to Kai, memorizing the feel of his arms around her, the scent of his skin, the sound of his heartbeat against her ear. "I feel as though my heart is being torn from my chest," she confessed. "You'll forget me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "When I'm gone, this will seem like a dream." Kai took her face between his hands, his dark eyes intense with feeling. "No matter how long it takes, no matter how far I must travel, I will find you. This I swear by the water that gives life, the earth that sustains us, the air we breathe and the fire that burns in our hearts." They kissed one final time, pouring all their love and longing into that embrace. Then Diana mounted the horse Kai had prepared for her and rode away without looking back, afraid her courage would fail if she saw his face again. Neither knew that Colonel Hargrove's men had captured an Apache scout the previous day. Under torture, he had revealed the location of the hidden valley. Even as Diana rode west toward the mission, soldiers were approaching from the east, preparing to strike at dawn. The lovers' separation, intended to be temporary, was about to become something far more desperate and uncertain as the forces arrayed against them closed in from all sides. The journey to the San Xavier del Bac mission took Diana and her young guide 3 arduous days. They traveled by night and hid during daylight hours, avoiding the patrols of soldiers that increasingly crisscrossed the territory. The boy, Tarek, moved with the natural stealth of his people, teaching Diana to leave minimal tracks and to distinguish between the sounds of nature and those made by human presence. "Kai taught me to be scout," the 10-year-old explained proudly in his limited English. "Said one day I be great warrior, but also know white man ways." Diana saw much of Kai in the boy, not in physical resemblance but in his calm intelligence and quiet dignity. "Kai is wise to teach you both paths," she replied. "The future may require your people to walk in 2 worlds." Tarek nodded solemnly. "Like you and Kai, 1 foot each world." The insight from one so young struck Diana deeply. Indeed, she and Kai had created something unique, a bridge between worlds that society insisted should remain separate. Whether that bridge could withstand the forces arrayed against it remained to be seen. When they finally crested a ridge and beheld the mission in the valley below, Diana felt a complex surge of emotion. The white-walled Spanish church stood like a mirage against the desert landscape, its intricate carvings and twin towers gleaming in the morning sunlight. It represented safety, yet also a return to the world she had left behind, a world of rigid boundaries and prejudices she no longer shared. "So you go now," Tarek said, reining his pony to a stop. "Not safe for me closer." Diana reached across to squeeze the boy's shoulder. "Thank you, Tarek. Tell Kai—" She faltered, overwhelmed by all she wished to convey. "Tell him I wait for him, as promised." Tarek nodded, his young face solemn. "He will come. Kai never breaks word." With that, he wheeled his mount and vanished back into the desert scrub, leaving Diana to approach the mission alone. Father Ignacio, a silver-haired Jesuit with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the Arizona sun, welcomed her without questions. The mission had long served as neutral ground between the various peoples of the territory, a sanctuary for anyone seeking peace. "You may stay as long as necessary, my child," he told Diana, after hearing only the barest outline of her situation. "God's house turns no one away." Diana was given a small room in the women's quarters adjacent to the church. The whitewashed adobe walls and simple furnishings, a narrow bed, a wooden chair, a small table, reminded her of her quarters at the schoolhouse in Copper Creek, though that life now seemed to belong to someone else entirely. Days passed with no word from Kai. Diana helped in the mission's small infirmary and taught the local children, both settler and indigenous, continuing her belief that education could bridge divides. But each sunset brought renewed worry as she scanned the horizon for any sign of her beloved. The mission's routine provided structure but little comfort. Diana found herself counting hours, then days, marking time by the ringing of the chapel bell and the changing patterns of light on the adobe walls. At night she dreamed of Kai, sometimes finding him safe, sometimes witnessing his capture, or worse. She would wake with tears on her cheeks, her arms reaching for someone who wasn't there. 2 weeks after her arrival, Father Ignacio found her in the mission garden, where she had taken to spending her afternoons. "You are troubled, my daughter," he observed, settling beside her on a stone bench. Diana nodded, unable to deny what must be obvious to everyone at the mission. "I fear for someone," she admitted, "someone very dear to me." The priest's expression remained neutral, though his eyes held compassion. "This someone? They are the reason you came to us?" "Yes," Diana replied simply. "And would I be correct in assuming this person is among those the army currently pursues?" Diana tensed, suddenly wary. Though Father Ignacio had shown her nothing but kindness, she had no way of knowing his true feelings about the conflict between settlers and Apache. Seeming to sense her hesitation, the priest sighed. "Peace, child. I ask not to judge, but to understand. I have spent 40 years in this territory, witnessing the suffering on all sides. Few conflicts are as simple as they first appear." Something in his tone, a weariness born of long-witnessed injustice, gave Diana courage to speak more frankly. "Father, what if everything we're told about the Apache raids is built on lies? What if soldiers are deliberately provoking violence to justify taking land? Then it would not be the first time in history that power has created its own truth," Father Ignacio replied quietly. "I have known many Apache over my years here. Like any people, they include both the honorable and the cruel, but I have observed that they rarely fight without provocation." His understanding loosened something within Diana, and words began to pour out. The overheard conversation in Copper Creek, her flight, the sandstorm, Kai's rescue, their time in the hidden valley, and finally, their promise to each other at the sacred waterfall. She stopped short of calling Kai her husband, uncertain how the priest might react to such a union. Father Ignacio listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment before speaking. "Love that crosses such boundaries is rare and precious," he said finally, "perhaps even sacred in its way." Diana blinked back tears of relief at his unexpected response. "But the world sees it as wrong." "The world has much to learn about love," the priest replied simply. "God sees beyond the artificial boundaries humans create." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the mission gate. Diana looked up to see a small figure stumbling across the courtyard, a boy clearly exhausted and injured. With a shock of recognition, she rose to her feet. "Tarek!" The Apache boy collapsed as she reached him, blood seeping through his tattered shirt from a wound in his shoulder. Father Ignacio called for help, and together they carried Tarek to the infirmary. As the mission doctor tended the boy's injury, a bullet graze that looked worse than it was, Diana held his hand, murmuring reassurances. When Tarek regained full consciousness, his first words sent ice through Diana's veins. "Soldiers came at dawn," he gasped, his young face taut with pain and exhaustion. "Fire, shooting, Kai fought so others could escape." Diana's heart froze. "Kai, is he—" Tarek shook his head, understanding her unspoken fear. "Captured, taken to fort." The news spread rapidly through the mission. That evening, after ensuring Tarek was resting comfortably, Father Ignacio found Diana in her room, packing her few belongings. "What do you intend, my daughter?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. "I must go to him," she replied without hesitation. The priest's expression was troubled. "They say he is to be hanged as a renegade leader. Colonel Hargrove himself issued the order after the attack on the valley. Then there isn't much time." Diana's voice was steady despite her inner turmoil. "It would be suicide to approach the fort," Father Ignacio warned. "They will arrest you as an Apache sympathizer, or worse." Diana met his gaze directly, her blue eyes fierce with determination. "Father, I made a promise before God and the elements. I cannot abandon him." The old priest studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Wait until morning. I may have a way to help you." Dawn found Diana dressed in the severe black habit of a novice nun, riding in a wagon beside Father Ignacio toward Fort Braverman. The priest had explained their cover story. They were bringing spiritual comfort to condemned men before execution. "Few will question a man of the cloth," he explained, "and a novice sister is expected to be silent in the presence of her superior." The ruse worked. They were admitted to the fort with minimal questioning, directed to the stockade where prisoners awaited judgment. Diana's heart pounded so loudly she feared the guards would hear it as they were led to a small, windowless cell. Kai sat on the dirt floor, his hands and feet shackled. Bruises discolored his face, and dried blood matted his hair, evidence of the beating he had endured. Despite his condition, his posture retained the quiet dignity that had first drawn Diana to him. When he raised his head and saw Diana standing there in her disguise, his eyes lit with a fierce joy that transcended his physical suffering. Father Ignacio spoke loudly for the benefit of the guard. "We will pray with the prisoner now. Please grant us privacy for the confession." When the door closed, Diana rushed to Kai, falling to her knees beside him. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered, though his eyes told a different story. "It's too dangerous." "I couldn't stay away," she replied, gently touching his bruised face. "We're going to get you out of here." Father Ignacio joined them, his expression grave. "The execution is scheduled for tomorrow at dawn. We have little time." Kai shook his head. "There is no escape from here. The fort is too well guarded." "There is always hope, my son," the priest said. From beneath his robes he produced a small phial and a vial. "This powder, mixed with water, will cause symptoms like cholera. The guards will not approach a prisoner they believe carries such sickness." Hope kindled in Diana's eyes. "And during the confusion, you must act quickly," Father Ignacio warned. "I have arranged for horses to be waiting beyond the western wall. There is a section where the adobe has crumbled, not large, but perhaps enough for a man to squeeze through." Kai looked at the priest with newfound respect. "Why would you help us?" Father Ignacio smiled sadly. "I have spent 40 years in this territory, witnessing the suffering on all sides. Perhaps in helping two who have found love across these divides, I serve God's purpose better than I could with 1,000 sermons." They worked swiftly, Diana filing at Kai's shackles while he swallowed the powder mixed with water from his cup. Within minutes, he was retching convincingly, his face pale with genuine exertion. When the guard peered through the small window in the door, Father Ignacio called out in alarm, "Guard! The prisoner has taken ill with flux. We need a doctor." The guard took one look at Kai, vomiting on the cell floor, and backed away. "I'll fetch the surgeon," he said, clearly reluctant to enter the cell. "Keep clear of him, Father. Cholera spreads like wildfire." As soon as the guard's footsteps faded, Diana resumed filing the shackles. The metal was thick, and progress was agonizingly slow. Sweat beaded on her forehead beneath the novice's coif as she worked. "Someone comes," Father Ignacio warned, his ear pressed to the door. Diana barely had time to hide the file in her habit before the door swung open. Instead of the surgeon, Colonel Hargrove himself stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 soldiers. His cold eyes took in the scene, the retching prisoner, the concerned priest, and the silent novice with downcast eyes. "What's this about cholera?" he demanded. Father Ignacio stepped forward. "The prisoner has taken violently ill, Colonel. I've sent for medical assistance." Hargrove's gaze narrowed. "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? The savage falls ill the night before his execution with visitors present." He turned to one of his men. "Fetch Dr. Willis and post additional guards outside. No one leaves until I'm satisfied this isn't some trick." Diana's heart sank. The colonel's suspicion had ruined their plan before it could even begin. She kept her face hidden beneath her hood, praying he wouldn't recognize her. "And you," Hargrove said, addressing Diana directly. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Slowly, Diana raised her eyes to meet his gaze, careful to keep her expression blank. Recognition flashed across the colonel's face. "Well, well," he said softly. "Miss Diana Frost, the schoolteacher who vanished during an Apache raid. How fascinating to find you here, disguised as a nun, attending to the very savage who supposedly kidnapped you." Before Diana could respond, Kai lunged forward despite his chains, placing himself between her and the colonel. "She is innocent," he growled. "She came only to pray for my soul." Hargrove laughed coldly. "Is that so? Then she won't mind returning to Copper Creek to explain her miraculous escape. After your execution, of course. He gestured to his men. Take them both. The woman to my quarters for questioning the savage back in chains, and arrest this priest for conspiring with enemies of the United States. Diana's world collapsed as rough hands seized her arms. The last glimpse she had of Kai was of him struggling against soldiers who beat him back to the ground with rifle butts. "No!" she screamed, abandoning all pretense. "Kai!" Diana paced the confines of Colonel Hargrove's office, mind racing. Through the window she could see soldiers erecting a gallows in the center of the fort's parade ground. Time was running out. The door opened, and Hargrove entered alone, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Miss Frost," he said with mocking politeness, "or should I say Mrs. What would an Apache's wife be called? Surely you've married the savage by now." Diana faced him squarely. "His name is Kai, son of Chief Maka, and yes, we are married in the eyes of God and by the customs of his people." Disgust crossed Hargrove's face. "A woman of your education and background consorting with an animal. It's unnatural. The only unnatural thing here is the hatred you propagate." Diana shot back. "I know the truth about the massacre your men committed, how you deliberately provoked this conflict to clear the Apaches from land you covet." Hargrove's expression hardened. "Careful, Miss Frost. Such accusations border on treason. It's the truth, and others know it too." "Father Ignacio will be sent back to Spain in disgrace," Hargrove interrupted. "As for you, I'm inclined to be merciful, given your delicate female sensibilities. Clearly, you've been confused by your ordeal." He moved closer, his voice softening to something more insidious. "I can help you, Diana. Say you were held captive, abused, forced to participate in heathen rituals. No one would blame you. You could return east with your reputation, if not intact, at least understood." Diana stared at him with undisguised revulsion. "And Kai? The savage dies at dawn as scheduled. His fate is sealed." "Then so is mine," Diana replied firmly, "because I will tell everyone who will listen about the honorable Apache who saved my life while your soldiers murdered women and children." Hargrove's face darkened with rage. "Then you'll hang beside him." He stormed out, locking the door behind him. Diana sank into a chair, despair threatening to overwhelm her. She had failed. By coming here, she had not only failed to save Kai, but had sealed her own fate as well. As night fell, Diana watched through the window as soldiers drank and laughed around fires, celebrating their victory over the savages. Her gaze drifted to the stars, the same stars she and Kai had watched together in the desert. Had it only been weeks ago? It felt like another lifetime. A soft tap at the window startled her. Diana approached cautiously to find a young Apache boy, Tarak, balanced precariously on the ledge. "Tarak!" she whispered in astonishment. "How did you get in here?" The boy grinned, despite the bandage visible beneath his torn shirt. "Walls not so high for one who climbs like mountain goat." He pressed something cold and metallic into her hand. A key. "From father. For door." Hope surged through Diana. "Kai, do you know where they're holding him?" Tarak nodded. "Underground cells. Many guards." From his shirt he produced a small knife. Not much, but better than nothing. Diana gripped the boy's shoulder. "Tarak, this is too dangerous. If they catch you—" "Kai taught me to be brave," the boy said simply. "Now I help teacher be brave too." The fort was quieter now, most soldiers having drunk themselves to sleep. Using the key Father Ignacio had somehow procured, Diana slipped from Hargrove's office and followed Tarak's directions to the underground cells. 2 guards stood watch at the entrance. Diana clutched the small knife. Knowing she had neither the skill nor the heart to use it on another human being, she needed another way. Inspiration struck as she spotted a bottle of whiskey at the guard's feet. Retreating to the colonel's office, she quickly located his personal supply, an expensive bourbon from Kentucky. Returning to her hiding place near the cells, she waited until one guard stepped away briefly, then rolled the bottle toward the remaining sentry. The guard looked around in confusion, then grinned as he discovered the unexpected bounty. When his companion returned, they debated briefly before deciding to sample the colonel's fine liquor. Within 30 minutes, both were slumped against the wall, snoring loudly. Diana crept forward, relieving one guard of his ring of keys. Her hands trembled as she tried key after key in the heavy lock. Finally, with a gratifying click, the door swung open. The underground chamber was damp and dark, lit only by a single lantern hanging from a hook. Diana moved quietly past cells containing other Apache prisoners until she found Kai. He lay motionless on the dirt floor, his breathing shallow. "Kai," she whispered urgently, fumbling with the cell keys. "Kai, wake up. We're getting out of here." His eyes opened slowly, disbelief giving way to joy as he recognized her. "Diana, how?" "No time to explain," she said, finally finding the right key. The cell door creaked open, and she rushed to his side. The shackles Father Ignacio had begun filing were still in place, but thinner now. With desperate strength, Diana worked at the weakened links until they finally gave way. Kai struggled to his feet, wincing with pain. "The other prisoners," he said hoarsely. "We cannot leave them." Diana hesitated only briefly before nodding. Together they moved from cell to cell, freeing the captured Apaches. As the last lock fell away, Kai addressed his people in their native tongue. There was no mistaking the pride and determination in his voice, despite his injuries. "What did you tell them?" Diana asked as they crept toward the exit. "That freedom awaits, but we must move like shadows," Kai replied, "and that my wife has the courage of 10 warriors." Outside, the cool night air revived them. The freed Apaches melted into the darkness, each taking a different route to confuse any pursuit. Tarek reappeared, leading them to where Father Ignacio waited with horses beyond the crumbled section of wall. "God go with you," the priest said, helping Kai mount despite his weakened state. "Head west toward the Sonoran Desert. Colonel Hargrove's jurisdiction ends at the border." Diana clasped the old man's hand. "Father, come with us. They'll punish you severely for helping us." Father Ignacio smiled serenely. "My place is here, child. There are other innocents who will need protection from men like Hargrove." With a heavy heart, Diana mounted her horse. As they prepared to ride out, a shout went up from the fort. The escape had been discovered. "Ride," Kai urged, and they spurred their horses westward, away from the fort and into the vast desert beyond. The dawn painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as they reached a high ridge overlooking the border. Behind them, dust clouds marked the pursuit, Colonel Hargrove and a dozen soldiers closing fast. "We cannot outrun them," Kai said grimly. "Not with our horses this exhausted." Diana surveyed the terrain ahead, a steep descent into a canyon that marked the boundary between territories. On the far side lay freedom, but the path down was treacherous. "We have to try," she insisted. "Together." Kai's hand found hers. "Together," he agreed. They began the descent, horses picking their way carefully down the rocky slope. Behind them, the soldiers had reached the ridge and were preparing to follow. A rifle shot cracked the morning stillness. Diana's horse reared in panic, nearly throwing her. Kai grabbed her reins, steadying the frightened animal. "Go!" he shouted as more shots rang out. "I'll hold them off." Diana stared at him in horror. "No, I won't leave you. This time you must," Kai insisted. "I will find you, no matter how long, no matter how far. Remember?" Tears streamed down Diana's face. "I can't lose you again." Kai's eyes held hers, filled with a love that transcended their impossible circumstances. "You won't. This I promise." Before she could protest further, he slapped her horse's flank, sending it galloping down the slope. Diana clung to the saddle, unable to turn back as Kai positioned himself behind a boulder, bow in hand, prepared to make his stand. The next minutes passed in a blur of gunfire and thunder of hooves. Diana reached the canyon floor, urging her exhausted mount toward the far side. Behind her, she heard shouts and more shots, then an ominous rumbling. Looking back, she saw a cloud of dust engulfing the slope. A rock slide, triggered by the gunfire, had swept down the ridge. Of Kai and the pursuing soldiers, there was no sign, only a massive pile of rubble where the path had been. "No!" Diana's anguished cry echoed across the canyon. "Kai!" Only silence answered. 3 months later, Diana stood on the porch of a small adobe house on the outskirts of Tucson, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and purple. After crossing the border, she had made her way to this growing settlement where no one knew her story. With her education, she had secured a position teaching at a small school that served both settler and Mexican children. Her hand rested on her stomach, where new life had begun to grow. Kai's child, a living reminder of their love. Though she told others she was a widow, in her heart she had not given up hope. Each night she lit a lantern and placed it in her window, a beacon for the one who had promised to find her. But as weeks turned to months with no word, doubt crept in. No one could have survived that rockslide. Perhaps it was time to accept that Kai was gone, that their child would never know its father except through her stories. On this particular evening, weariness overcame her earlier than usual. Diana extinguished the lantern and prepared for bed, fighting back the familiar ache of grief and loneliness. She had just drifted to sleep when a soft tapping at her window roused her. Confused and disoriented, Diana lit a candle and approached cautiously. Her figure stood in the shadows of her small garden, tall, straight-backed, familiar despite the months of separation. With trembling hands, Diana flung open the door. The candle illuminated features she had memorized in her dreams, dark eyes that held both strength and tenderness, the proud line of his jaw, the slight curve of his lips as he smiled. "Kai," she whispered, afraid he might vanish if she spoke too loudly. "Is it really you?" He stepped into the light, thinner than before, with new scars visible on his face and arms, but gloriously, impossibly alive. "I told you I would find you," he said simply. "No matter how long, no matter how far." Diana flew into his arms, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Kai held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "The rock slide carried me down the canyon. I was badly injured, unconscious for many days. When I recovered, I began searching for you, following rumors of a blue-eyed teacher who lived alone." His hand moved to rest gently on her rounded belly, wonder dawning in his eyes as he felt the flutter of movement beneath. "Our child," Diana confirmed, watching emotions play across his face, surprise, joy, fierce protectiveness. "Then I have found both of you," Kai said softly. "My family." They stood together in the doorway, bathed in candlelight, Apache warrior and Boston schoolteacher, bound by a love that had overcome every barrier placed before it. The desert stretched around them, vast and full of both danger and beauty, much like the life they would forge together. "What happens now?" Diana asked, her head resting against his chest, listening to the strong heartbeat she had feared silenced forever. "Now we live," Kai replied simply. "We build something new, not entirely Apache, not entirely white, but something that honors both and creates space for others to follow." As the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, Diana and Kai held each other close, their promise fulfilled against all odds. In a land torn by conflict, they had found in each other not just love, but a vision of what could be, a future where understanding conquered fear, where bridges replaced barriers, and where love proved stronger than hatred. And in that moment, beneath the endless stars, their story was just beginning. The end, dear listener. As we close this journey through the arid Arizona desert of 1870, where Diana and Kai found in each other what the world insisted was impossible, I'd like to share a reflection with you. In our hearts, each of us carries a promise similar to the one Kai made to Diana by the waterfall. "No matter how long, no matter how far, I'll find you." This promise echoes across the decades and reminds us that even at 60, 70, or 80 years, our hearts still recognize the call of true love. The sandstorms of life may have altered our landscapes, left scars on our souls, and transformed the paths we thought we would follow. But just as Kai followed nearly invisible tracks to find Diana, we too can follow that inner voice that guides us back to what truly matters. The barriers that separated Diana and Kai, prejudice, war, cultural differences, may look different today, but we all face our own obstacles to connection. Perhaps it's past hurts that make us hesitant to trust again. Perhaps it's the fear that our best years are behind us. Or maybe it's simply the routines we've built that leave little room for wonder and discovery. Yet tonight, as you rest your head upon your pillow, remember that it's never too late for new beginnings. Diana and Kai's story reminds us that love doesn't recognize the boundaries of age, background, or circumstance. Their reunion teaches us that patience and faith can overcome even the most formidable challenges when the connection is genuine. Let this story be a gentle lullaby that soothes away the worries of your day. May it wrap around you like a protective blanket, bringing peaceful dreams and renewed hope for tomorrow. Like the lantern Diana placed in her window each night, may your spirit remain alight with expectation, for the good things still to come in your life. As the stars watch over you tonight, the same stars that witnessed Diana and Kai's journey, know that you are never truly alone. Your story continues to unfold in beautiful ways, and there are still chapters waiting to be written, connections waiting to be made, and joys waiting to be discovered. Rest well, dear friend. Tomorrow brings new opportunities to find your own sacred waterfalls, to make your own heartfelt promises, and to experience the transformative power of love that, like Kai and Diana's, knows no boundaries. With deepest appreciation for sharing this time together. Wild West Whispers. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If this story gave you strength, tears, or even a bit of peace, we kindly invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share it with someone you care about. Your support means the world to us. It inspires us to continue creating stories filled with love, redemption, and hope. And remember, at the end of this video, you'll see another hand-picked story from our channel. Click and let yourself be surprised by more beautiful emotional journeys like this one. With love, the Wild West Whispers team.